in this lesson, we'll create kind of some slime underneath our character that kind of puddles around him and then sticks to some of the mesh. So to do this, we need a copy of this mesh geometry. So I'm going to go ahead and take the mesh subtool and let's duplicate it. So now we've got a copy down here. I also want to create some geometry for kind of represent the actual puddling, where we have this. We want some of it to be sort of stuck to these where we can still see through the holes. Then we also want some puddling here. So I'm going to go ahead and append, and let's just append a cylinder to our scene here. All right, so now we need to kind of put this in position. So I'm going to use just deformation, kind of offset this and rotate it. Kind of rotate that around. Let's offset it in the Y, and I just want to make it also a bit thinner. You could use transpose to do this as well. We'll take down the size in the Y. So just make that, you want to almost make it the thickness of our mesh there. And then, you know, if you want to, you can come in and kind of put this more into position. Kind of scale it up a little bit. Move it over. Now I want to come in from the top view, and I'm going to, let's just shrink it down a little bit more in the Y, and then we'll move it back down. So I just want it to be a little bit thinner. So we'll kind of move it back in that direction. Kind of go to the top view. Let's go back to draw, and let's subdivide this a little bit. And I'm going to use the move brush, and I just want to kind of create a little bit more shape to this. Give this puddle a little bit more shape. It's kind of coming out. I want to try to maintain the position of it. We'll just add a little bit more shape to it. So something like that. Okay, I want to make sure that it's sticking through the mesh, so we can maybe offset that a little bit more, so it's sticking down in there. Something like that. Now let's take our new mesh that we created, our new mesh that we duplicated off from the from this sort of grate here, and what I want to do is I want to cut away part of this. So I only want to show the part that's going to be covered by this ooze. And so we'll use our select rectangle, but I actually want to, instead of using the rectangle, we'll use the lasso. And so now I'll hold down Control and Shift, and I'm just going to come in and start to drag around in these different areas and just kind of real roughly create a selection here. Okay, if we want to come in and get rid of certain parts, you can just turn that red to get rid of different parts. Maybe we don't want it to extend out quite that far. Okay, so something like that. We'll get rid of some of that. Okay, maybe also here. All right, so once we've done that, we need to get rid of those polygons. So we'll go into our geometry subpalette. Let's delete hidden. Now let's merge all this together. So we want to have both of these as part of the same mesh. So let's go ahead and take this and we'll merge it down with this one. So go ahead and go to merge, merge down. Okay. So now we've got a single mesh here. Let's go ahead and solo this. And now these are all sort of separated out. If we go to our polyframe, you can see these are different polyframes. So let's go ahead and go to geometry and we'll dynamesh this together. So go dynamesh. May need to increase our resolution a little bit. Let's go ahead and dynamesh that. So let me go ahead and clear the mask first, and then we'll dynamesh that. So there we've got our dynamesh. And if there are some little parts that are sticking off, you can go ahead and remove those and kind of clean things up a little bit. if you want to do that and then remesh it. You don't necessarily want it to be perfectly clean, but we don't want to make it any harder on ourselves than we need to. So on some of these, we'll just kind of clean things up a little bit. Okay, maybe come in here and get that little bit sticking off there. Okay, we can go ahead and remesh that. Oh, and we've hidden that, so obviously we need to, before we do that, we'll go ahead and delete hidden. Now we'll remesh. So it's kind of made everything one mesh, although it still kind of looks like separate. So what we want to do now is just kind of smooth things out. Before we do that, we can actually inflate everything so it's sticking off the surface of the wires. So we could go into deformation and just come in with a small amount of inflation. You can see that's kind of inflating those. So we want it to be on kind of on top of there. And then we can come in and kind of smooth out some of these areas. So let me turn up the intensity a bit. And we can start to smooth out these areas so that it kind of blends together. And if you wanted to use kind of your sculpting tools to sculpt some detail on here, you could do that as well. Okay, so we could come in here with our move and between these just kind of just start to add that in so it looks like it sort of blends down a little bit more with that. It's not completely separate. Kind of smooth that back in. We'll do the same thing over here. You could get a kind of a lower resolution too on your Dynamesh. We kind of help with that. So we can just kind of smooth things out here a little bit more. Okay. If you wanted to go back to your Dynamesh, so right now it's 256. We could set that down a little bit lower. Get something a little bit softer. Okay. Keep in mind when you smooth it out, it could tend to lose a little bit of volume. So you may want to go back and do your inflation again. Let's kind of smooth that out. Come back in here with like our standard brush. Come in here and maybe add some kind of detail coming in here. Push it down a little bit. And just make it generally look like more of a puddle. And if you want to, you could bring the rest of your model back so you can get a little bit better idea of what you want it to look like. Just kind of rough it up a little bit. You bring in some of that detail. Kind of come along here. Okay, so, and just kind of build it up to him in there, and then we'll look at, coming up, how to add some of that goo and ooze to him. Now for this, we want to have it be kind of a slightly different material than the metal of the grate. And so we can just add a different material to this. We could get something like a gel shader with maybe a green. You can play with the different materials. We talked about those. So we'll go ahead and fill that up. Okay, then if we turn that grate back on. Okay, and the grate, we probably want to go in and add some color to it. So we could use our color spray with our different alphas. And actually, you don't want to paint material on that. Paint color. So I'll go ahead and paint that through. Maybe make it kind of a rusty color. Add a little bit of gray to it, just to get some poly paint in there. And then you can see that how that wet goo kind of sticks to it underneath. There, we'll paint that. Okay, so that's kind of just a quick look at how we can use existing meshes, in this case a complex mesh like this wire frame mesh, to create some interesting detail here. Now we can also, you can see I can come in here and let's get the inflate. So if we take a look, it's going to be right over here. And I want to make sure to go back to our ooze. And if there's areas where it's the wire sticking through and you don't want it to, you can just inflate that. Okay, but you may want it to have certain areas that are free from this stuff. But it's just kind of a nice way of adding a little bit of detail there. And if you want to, you can then turn off Dynamesh once you get to the right spot. We can come in here with Move. And right next to him, we can have it sort of going up to him, so it's kind of coming off of him and blending down with that stuff on the bottom. Again, you can kind of smooth it back out. All right, so that's a look at using Dynamesh to create this sort of ooze-like effect here. In the next lesson, we'll take a look at how we can get that same effect to create the different ooze patterns that are going to be happening on him. So we'll do that as separate geometry. So we'll go ahead and do that next.